Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Grafana Office Hours. This is the third one now. I am Nicole van der Hoeven. I'm a senior developer advocate at Grafana Labs. And today I am with a coworker, David Harris, who is a senior product manager. Welcome, David.
Thank you so much, Nicole. Great to be here.
Tell us a little bit about yourself. What do you do in Grafana?
Ask a question. So I work in the product team at Grafana, and my specialty is on plugins platform. So everything to do with the plugin ecosystem in Grafana and how we help developers build them, how you can load them into a Grafana instance to extend it with new capabilities. And yeah, it's great to be here to be able to chat a little bit about what's new.
Yeah, so there have been quite a few new changes in plugins recently, especially with Grafana 10. But maybe we could talk a little bit, we could zoom out a bit and talk about plugins in general. I
Mhm.
know that plugins was one of the first things that was introduced into Grafana after it was created. Why do you think plugins are so important?
Yeah, so plugins, I think, were initially introduced in version 3 of Grafana. So this is pretty early days. And it's kind of a realization of the whole big tent philosophy, open and extendable nature that Grafana is. So it enabled people to extend our core capabilities with new features. So I think it was mostly front end plugins at the time. Like if you wanted to do a new visualization on your data, you could easily build a panel plugin, build that into Grafana, and eventually it would be in the catalog so that all users could benefit from it.
So when you talk about plugin, what I think there are different kinds of Grafana plugins, right? It can be an app or a panel or a data source. Can
Mhm.
you go into the differences between those?
Yeah, sure. And I think this is an area where like even Graphanistas sometimes get a little confused about. So if you kind of think a plugin is just a generic bit of code that you're contributing into Grafana, it's a little extension, and then you can extend different things. So Grafana dashboards display data. How do you get that data? It's from a data source. A plugin can be a data source plugin so that you can query a specific backend, construct the data frame that can then be visualized. You want to visualize it in a dashboard? We have some inbuilt panels. Well, we have many inbuilt panels now. But you can also create a whole new way to display that data. So you can create a panel plugin, and then that will appear in your drop down for visualizations. Then came applications, and applications are really quite fun. They could be like a simple bundling mechanism, so that if you wanted to create a data source and a panel and then bundle those together to make it easier for your users to like get the most out of that data source, you can do that as an app. It will load both. Or applications can also extend the Grafana UI with new pages. And this is what we're starting to see really come to fore now, as Grafana becomes more of an application platform, basically. So all of the new features that we're bringing to market, like even K6 coming under the Grafana bandwagon, like K6 now exists as an application on top of Grafana. So it provides you a completely bespoke view tailored to the task at hand, but all within the Grafana context. So applications can build those new experiences for users, which is really exciting for us.
So one of the good things about having plugins is that it's really indicative of this big tent philosophy that we have, which is that we aren't ever going to try to limit what people can do with Grafana. Even if some people might think that, we have plugins that help people take their data and put it to competitors, but we don't really see it as competition. Rising tide lifts all boats. And I think that the fact that we are so open and the plugin ecosystem is such a crucial part of the big picture for us is really just very supportive of that core philosophy. I want to get
100%. Like
into
it's not about like you don't have to lift and shift your data from where it is today. You can just bring it into Grafana so that everyone can benefit from it, and you can correlate it with other data types as well.
yeah. I do want to get into the changes in Grafana 10, but we already have a sneaky question from Raja Ranjit Kumar Reddy. On-call plugin has a lot of challenges. Please address those issues. And if, by the way, if anyone has any questions or comments, you can leave them in the comments on YouTube. Please try to make them like plugins related, because otherwise David might not be the best person to answer them. I mean, he can try.
Yep. So no, we always appreciate feedback from users. Please raise issues. Please come chat to us in the community where you find things which aren't as you'd expect. The on-call team are actively developing and actively improving that plugin, and they'll be more than willing to listen to what's up.
Yeah, and also maybe specify as well like what challenges they are so that we can better help you, like so we understand what you were expecting and what you didn't get. But yeah, changes in Grafana 10. So the way I see it, there were three main changes that are plugins related in Grafana 10. There were some breaking changes to plugins, and then there's the new tool for creating a plugin, and then there are new features that plugin developers can now use in plugins. Of course, there were a lot of other things that came with Grafana 10. And if you want to see those changes in more detail, then check out the first Grafana office hours where I talked to Mitch Seaman about the overview of all of those changes. But yeah, let's talk about the breaking changes. What did you break, David?
Yeah, it's one of those things, like, we often celebrate major releases. It's just like this wonderful achievement where there's so many great new features that we're delivering to users. But it's not all like flowers and sunshine. Like, there are sometimes negative sides to this and things that sometimes break. I think within Grafana, particularly recently, we're trying to be very conscious of reducing the number of breaking changes that we introduce. And actually, one of the tools that we provide for plugin developers is an API compatibility check. So that if you're updating your plugin, you want to see if it's compatible with the latest Grafana APIs, this will tell you. And we actually got some feedback fairly recently saying like they didn't really find this tool particularly useful. And actually, that's because we've been running it internally. So we're catching a lot of the changes that are happening internally before they would ever hit plugin developers. So we try and minimize this as much as we can. Unfortunately, you can't always do that. We are dependent on other libraries, other technologies, as all tech stacks are. And sometimes we need to update. So one of the major ones that we had to update with this release was React. So our main front-end library, we bumped it to React 18. From what we've seen internally, 98% of the time, this just worked. Right? It didn't cause any issues. We also did kind of like smoke tests with a bunch of community plugins to try and make sure we were uncovering like any potential gotchas. We raised the posts in our community forums to sort of say, like, this is how you can test it before Grafana 10 goes out the door. We know that requires plugin developers to like actively be trying to do this, and we do appreciate their efforts when they do try to maintain it and update it as much as they can. We haven't seen anything come back from that, which is very good. Grafana 10 has now been out for a little while, and thankfully support tickets are very low. We haven't seen many breakages, but I would still ask all community plugin developers, try it out with the latest version. If you're using the Create plugin tool, like, it's actually really easy to test your plugin with different Grafana versions, and I'll show that in a demo later. But yeah, that was probably the biggest breaking change for plugin developers that we introduced. The other one, it's kind of more niche. Hopefully it doesn't actually affect people, but maybe if I share my screen, we'll go through like where users can actually find out this information in the first place. So this is just the Grafana docs homepage. You get the what's new, you get the breaking changes. And for plugin developers specifically, we do have migration guides. So if we look in the migration guides, 9 till 10, we've got upgrading your React version, and there's this one around data frames. So they used to return a vector. Now it's just plain arrays, but in version 9, you can still basically just keep going. 10 should be exactly the same. It's only if you've directly implemented the vector then you're going to have problems, but it's fairly unlikely that people have done that. But it is something to also be aware of in Grafana 11, which is when we'll probably remove those vector methods.
Okay, so if people are still using Grafana 9, do they have to worry about these changes right now?
No, most code should still be absolutely fine.
Okay, but as a plugin developer, probably you would want your plugin to be able to be used on Grafana Cloud, for example. So that might be more of an issue. And even if you're self-hosting Grafana 9, I mean, at some point you're going to want to upgrade. So maybe also it would also be a good idea for users of those plugins to start thinking about that migration path, like you said. And it seems like there are two things that are actually going on here. One is that the version of React is changing from 17 to 18. We've upgraded, but also we have already deprecated, correct me if I'm wrong, we already deprecated Angular a few years ago, but now with Grafana 10, we are starting to really phase it out. Is that right?
Yes, that's right. So Angular has been deprecated for some time. I think we started moving to React in Grafana version 5, maybe. And that was mainly to attract like the latest talent and to ensure that Grafana could always be contributed to. So Angular really has been a legacy platform for us for quite some time now. That said, there are still almost 100 plugins that are dependent on Angular. If you want to find out which ones are affected, we recently published an update to our deprecation notice, which talks about some of the changes that we're doing right now, as well as introducing a new list of all the plugins which use Angular and potential alternatives that you could consider if you're a user.
Ooh, could you send me that link so that I can also paste it in the
Sure.
chat?
So
Because I was thinking, a developer would know, but if you're just using an Angular plugin, you might not really know what it's using.
exactly. So it can be found off our Angular deprecation notice. And so the only thing that we're really doing in 10, so a little bit of history, we had originally intended that in Grafana 10, we would start to flip the switch on the Angular support enabled feature toggle to say that by default, Angular support is disabled. We still know that there's a lot of customers and a lot of users who are using Angular plugins, so we're trying to be a little bit more responsible, shall we say. And what we're trying to do is introduce new ways that you can find out just how affected you are by this dependency. I'll show some of those in a bit, but ultimately we've delayed that decision on flipping the switch, so it's more likely to be Grafana 11 now. Only if you're using hosted Grafana, or Grafana Cloud, I should say. If you sign up new today, then that support will be disabled by default because we don't want you to get into a situation when you're dependent on this particular plugin, which is not going to be supported in the future. So we're going to try and prevent you from getting into that situation. But for all OSS users, all on-prem users, nothing's changed in 10.
Do you, off the top of your head, do you know of any notable plugins that are maybe very popular that you could mention?
Yeah, so two of the most popular ones, we have World Map, and we do have a fully supported version that you can change to, which is called GeoMap, which I think is probably somewhere under here. So GeoMap is basically our replacement for World Map. If you're still using World Map, strongly advise that you move to GeoMap. The other one that we've seen, particularly with Grafana 10, actually, is that we had the BigQuery data source, and that is Angular based, as well as only supporting versions up to 9.x. So with Grafana 10, that is no longer compatible at all, and it's Angular based. So either way, you should be moving away from that. Again, thankfully, Grafana Labs do maintain our own version of the BigQuery plugin. So that's a really good one to go to. There's a few others that are popular and there aren't alternatives for, which is a shame. But when you uncover that you have this dependency, now is a great time to kind of offer to support that developer in any migration or tell them that you really require it, because I think most plugin developers would appreciate that communication and ultimately assistance as well.
Okay, so it kind of sounds like they're not actually breaking changes yet.
We're trying not to break people. No one likes breaking people.
I don't know. I'm a load tester. I kind of do like to break things. So
That's fair. That is fair.
so it is breaking soon.
Yes. The thing is,
or
like, it's particularly if you're maintaining an Angular plugin, then particularly for like Grafana Cloud users of that plugin, there's going to be less and less of them that are able to access it. So really do need to start considering how you can update to be React based. And you're not on your own there. Like, we do provide tutorials. We have a migration guide, which is linked in the plugin docs as well. And you can come chat to us in the forums. You can come chat to us in Slack whenever you encounter something that you're not sure how to do. Like, the team is there to support you.
okay, so you mentioned earlier that there's some sort of tool that highlights when you have plugins that are outdated. Is that just enabled for everybody by default?
So we now have a way to show you if you're depending on an Angular plugin, if that's what you mean.
Okay, yes.
Yes. So I'll probably have to run that off main, but I can do that. So give me a sec.
Oh, did you want me to share it already, or?
Yeah, go for it.
Now you can't type any secrets.
No, it should be fine. I probably haven't done. Do that first. Let's put them on full screen. So this is just running main Grafana, what we have today. So if you go to plugins and you go to view all, so this is showing you all the plugins that are available in our catalog. We've started to introduce this new shield to indicate when something is dependent on Angular. If you go into the actual details, like if you were trying to install it, you can read about the support deprecation. And in my instance, I've actually disabled Angular support, so it's now blocking me from installing this. If Angular support is enabled, you can still install it, but you've now got this warning screen.
Okay, good. That's good to know. If you already had it installed though, and you were using that, so if you have that Angular support disabled, like you have, and you already had that plugin installed, would you know without going into the plugin section, like if you just tried to use it?
So if you've already got it installed and you've already got Angular support installed, then you'd now get this warning message. If you've got it installed, but you then disable Angular support, then that will prevent the plugin from being loaded in the first place.
Okay. All right.
I think.
Or
One
it
of the
should.
developers can correct me on that in the comments if need be.
Tell us if you see a different behavior. Okay, what else is new?
So there's quite a few things that are new. Maybe we could hop into like how we actually create plugins. So that will start to show us like some of the new features that we've delivered there. So the only other thing that we formally removed rather than deprecated now is the. Oh, I need to present again. Just clean that. There we go. Present again. Yeah. So previously, when you were creating plugins, we had the Grafana toolkit. We had deprecated most of the commands that were in there for building new plugins, signing plugins. We've now fully removed them so that people can use our new create plugin tool. The Create plugin tool is like a much faster and more flexible way to create plugins. It offers you a lot more, including an out-of-the-box development environment, so it's very easy to get going. It's always fun just to like see this in action. So let's just do it.
Can I ask a basic question?
Go for it.
Because remember, I'm still new to Grafana. What was in the toolkit?
So the toolkit was just a node module that helped you scaffold plugins, but it didn't really give you a lot. It gave you that bare bones of like, well, here's a Planner plugin that you can then extend. But if you wanted to test that, you had to add your own end-to-end test. You had to add your own unit test. You had to figure out how you were going to package it into Grafana to actually run it. Whereas if you do, which one is it? That one. If we just quickly create a plugin, you get a few questions, like what's going to be the name of your plugin? So David plugin. What's the organization? So this is your Grafana Cloud account. So I think on a sympathetic moose, how to describe it. You can change this later. So it's ASD. You then get a selection of like what type of plugin you would like to create. Is it an app? Is it a data source? Is it a panel? Or is it scenes? So another new feature that's come around in the Grafana 10 timeframe is scenes applications, which are really exciting. As a fully declarative way, you can bring almost like dashboard-like experiences into applications. And Torkel did the previous Lime stream. So like if you're interested in scenes, definitely advise checking that out. But we have a template for it in the Create plugin tool. So if you want to get started with it easily, that's one way to do it. So why not? Get asked if you want to create a backend part of your plugin. So backends allow you to do things like if you're a data source that needs to interact with like an SQL database, like it allows you to build that query and handle that. You can add alerting as well to data sources, but you don't need to do it for all plugins. And in this case, I won't. We provide out-of-the-box CI and release workflows. So we use GitHub Actions, and it means that when you commit, it will build it. You can release it automatically. Again, I'm not going to do that just as a demo. And this API compatibility check that I mentioned earlier, you can add it here and now. But again, I won't do it just for the purposes of this demo. I've now got a scaffolded application. So you can kind of see what's included there. So we've got integration end-to-end tests. We've got a Docker Compose file, which gives us a way to like easily spin up a development environment. And we've got the actual bare bones of the application. And our plugin JSON, which describes the app. So from here, what can we do? We could do install. And that will probably take forever. So we can have a look at the Docker Compose file. And basically this means like this is how it's really easy to just test your plugin with multiple versions. It accepts an environment variable. So all you need to do is change that environment variable and you can quickly spin up a new Grafana instance on a particular version with your plugin enabled already because we have it all set up in provisioning for you. So all you'd need to do is Grafana version, choose which version you want to run server. Unfortunately, NPM can take a little while to install everything, especially when you're doing a screen share. So if we have the elevator music plugin for, we can start that off.
So with the Grafana toolkit, which part of it did it do? It did the scaffolding, but not the tests and not the CI/CD stuff and not the API compatibility check?
None of that was included, no.
Okay.
And it was also, because it was just kind of a package under Grafana, it was quite hard for users to discover, whereas now we've got our own repo, we've got our own dedicated microsite, which I can quickly show whilst this is still going. So, tools. So we've got our own site, which gives you comprehensive documentation about using these tools. So it'll walk you through how you create a plugin, how you sign it, and how you then like push it to the catalog as well. So it's a lot easier for people to come find out how they should be using the tools, and benefit from the latest ones.
Okay, and what if people were already using Grafana Toolkit?
But if you've already running Toolkit, then one of the advantages, we do have a migration command built in as well. So if you go to, let me send the link yonder from Microsoft. If you go there, you can find a migration guide. We do provide a specific command that you can run to help you migrate from Toolkit to Create plugin.
Great. Okay, I'll just put that in. And we also got a comment from Timur, who is one of our coworkers. Timur says, if you have the plugin already installed and disable Angular support, it will not be loaded at the start of the Grafana instance.
Which I think is what I said.
A good confirmation. Yes, it is. But now you can say it with conviction.
There we go. Thank you, Tina. So now my front end's built. It doesn't have a back end, so I don't have to worry about that. So I should just be able to do Docker Compose up, which will be the default. So I think this will probably be running 9.3 maybe. But post.
Shouldn't 10 be the default yet, or?
It depends what you want to test with. But again, like we set a default in the tool, but you can easily override it. So this is running 9.5. If I just kill that container and run Grafana version 10 on server, it does the same thing. Now, refresh, I'm running 10. So really easy to just quickly hot swap between different versions if you want to see how your plugin behaves, because it can be weird if you don't log in. Do that. Then with that scaffolded application, I've now got David's plugin here, and this is a scenes app. So this is where we're starting to see this dashboard-like experience within an application with template variables, with time ranges. You can do tabs, you can drill down. So if you want to find out more details about something, you can drill into this, and it provides really nice interactive experiences for users. And this is like all out of the box. Like I built this in a minute or like 30 seconds of interaction, and then waiting for npm. It's really easy to get going. You can quickly hop into your editor of choice just to play around. Load it in VS Code, so you can start to see.
Can you zoom in?
Oh yeah, sorry, the eye test. Yeah, so you can quickly jump into ones. So I think this is a fairly easy one to just show a hot swap. So you've got a Hello World panel as one of the ones. Go save. Then I think there's hot swaps. There you go. Easily test changes.
So are these the samples that were loaded already through the Create plugin tool? Are they the same ones that are in that examples repo for plugins?
Yeah, so this is another great way for people to get started. We do try and provide a number of examples to help you build applications. So you can see in this repo, which I'll provide a link for.
I think I already found it.
Fantastic. Thank you.
That was actually a leading question.
Seamless. So this is basically the app with Seams demo. It's the same template that we use. In the future, I would love to make it so that within Create plugin, we could basically have any of these as a starter project. It's not likely something that we'll get to in the immediate future, unless someone feels like contributing that, which would be wonderful. But yeah, one day that would be the dream. So you could actually just create a starter project from any of these. But for now, you get the basic application from the scaffold, and then you can go to this repo to kind of see specifics about how things work. So like another new feature that's kind of come to fore in version 10 is extensions. And we have examples of how you can build an application which has an extension point. It's very easy to clone this repo locally, and because it's all using the same create plugin tool to actually scaffold it in the first place, you've still got the ability to easily update your dependencies, and you've still got that same out-of-the-box developer environment that I was talking about earlier, or just shown.
See, this is why it's confusing, because when I was asking you about like what plugins are, you said they're like extensions, but extensions are, you're
Names are
saying
tricky,
now, are
aren't they?
new. Yeah. So now, okay. So let me see if I get this right. Plugins are basically anything that add functionality to Grafana. And right now it can be an app, including an app that uses the Scenes framework, which is also an app but uses a different framework, a panel, or a data source.
Yep.
Where do integrations fit in?
So there's two ones now. Yes. So
And then extensions.
Yep. So integrations are a feature within Grafana Cloud, and basically, again, it's almost like a bundling, but they include an agent and an exporter effectively. So it's how you would monitor like a Linux server or something like that. And this would export metrics to like Prometheus metrics and then build dashboards for it. So an integration kind of helps you monitor a service. And then usual data sources. But a good way to look at the difference would be kind of the Redis one. So the Redis integration helps you monitor your Redis database. The Redis database plugin helps you get data out of Redis and then visualize it. So it's kind of like, are you monitoring the system, or are you visualizing its data?
Okay, all right. So integrations monitor other hardware components, but some of those might also be data sources in themselves, and send data to Grafana basically to be visualized. Okay, and then now you're saying that extensions are also new. So what's the deal there, and why wasn't it one of the things you could choose from?
So extensions are currently a capability that you can add to applications. So all applications can contribute extensions. And the best way to kind of let's see what an extension is to show you. So if you go to play.grafana.org, which I'm pretty sure everyone can access, this is a place to get inspiration on what you can build in your Grafana dashboards. What extensions allow you to do is, like, as an application, you can hook into somewhere within the core Grafana UI. So we've initially started with panels. So now when you go through a drop-down menu for a panel, so in the top right, you've got I think it's a burger menu, this one. We've now got a new extensions folder. So from here, like using the context within this panel, you can now declare an incident. So that's using our IRM app, or you can create machine learning based forecast on what this data might be, like using the ML app. So, and you can do that straight from within the context. So assuming it does actually work, there you go. I can declare an instance without having to leave like this view, without having to like suddenly hop into a different application and remember what I was trying to do in the first place. And I feel like this is probably one of the features which excites me most in Grafana at the moment, because as we've kind of gone all in on this app platform, we don't want to create siloed experiences, whereas like I have this context, I have that context. This allows you to like bring it all together to a journey which you understand, and just it breaks down those walls. So at the moment, you can extend the panel menu, and as an application, you can create your own custom hooks that other people can then extend. So you can make your application extensible. And I think as of yesterday or the day before, we just landed an extension point in Explore as well. So familiar with Explore, you can usually add that query to a dashboard. You can now do anything from that add button. So we're starting to see, like, again, you might be able to declare an incident in the future. or you could like link it to something else. Like the possibilities are endless, and that's why it's really exciting, particularly seeing what we've already seen from plugin developers where they've extended Grafana in ways we could never have imagined. Like, there's a whole new way for them to do that, so we can't wait to see what they build.
Okay, so it sounds like extensions are different from apps in that when you have an app, you would have to go to that app to be able to use it. And then extensions are a way for apps to kind of get called from other apps or elsewhere in the Grafana UI. Is that right?
Exactly. So instead of having to go into the incident app and declaring an incident here, all right, I can do it straight from a dashboard.
And is it still also a plugin?
The extension itself is not a plugin, no. The only
Okay.
requirement for extensions is they're contributed by applications, and the application has to be preloaded. I think that's the only requirement.
Okay.
So I think this one up with extensions. So this provides a few extension points, and this one is only visible from time series and pie charts, so you can kind of limit to where they're exposed, and it would return a little modal, I think. Yep, so that returns a modal.
So when you were demonstrating creating a plugin from scratch, you went straight to the Scenes app. I didn't ask this of Torkel when I was interviewing him about Scenes, but would you recommend now that if someone's starting to create an app that they use the Scenes app instead?
It kind of depends on their use case. Scenes opens up a whole new host of possibilities, but it's still very early days. We're using it internally within Grafana, so the application observability application is built on top of Scenes, but we're also aware that this is a library that's likely to change in the future. So it depends whether you're willing to join us on that early stage, or whether you kind of want to wait for it to come a little bit more mature and become the kind of default within Grafana, which is still a little while away. But we would certainly love to have plugin developers try this out and give us their feedback of like what's missing in the framework, what's confusing about the framework, so that we can improve our documentation, we can improve our examples. Because yeah, we think it's an incredibly powerful tool for plugin developers, and we are excited for them to try it out. But just with the caveat, like this is new, things might break.
Yeah. And do you know, like when people start to create new plugins for Grafana, do they typically start with data source and then eventually, they also add a panel and then they bundle it into an app? Or do most people just go straight to app, or what do they do?
It's a good question. I think we've seen mixtures of everything. I think it really does depend on like what's missing for you. And again, it's one of the advantages of Grafana. We are so extensible that even if you fall off our golden path, there's always a way forward, because you can always build it and contribute it yourself. We work with a lot of commercial partners as well, and they will contribute specific data sources for their database. So like if they have a particular time series database that they want to be like fully in control of how that data is returned to the user, they might create their own data source plugin. We see new visualizations for new use cases, like if you're doing BI or something like that, then you might need a different type of visualization or a new panel for that. Applications, we probably see less applications from the community, just because it is a little bit more complex. But there are some great examples out there, and like the Redis application is a really good example. And the Zabbix one, that's now been brought in, or the developer now works for Grafana. That's one of our most popular application plugins, and I think applications are going to take off more in the future because of things like Scenes and because of things like extensions.
Okay, we've already talked a bit about some of the new features that plugin developers can use in plugins. Namely, we talked about the extensions, which are not plugins, but which can be included as part of apps, which are plugins. And that's
Easy,
a
isn't
way. I know, right? Especially for a new person who's just trying to learn all this terminology. But that's why I'm here asking you the questions. We also talked about the scenes functionality. So you already that's the one that you demonstrated already. That's really cool that you can get started with that, especially since it's so new. It's good that you're not starting from nothing, really.
Exactly. I think it's one of the big advantages that we can provide in tooling and these example repos as well, is just to help you at least get the foothold, because it's always easier to start from something that works rather than have to build completely from scratch.
But the other thing that I wanted to ask you about is that the other new features, the distributed tracing and debugging features for plugins in general. So I guess they didn't exist with the Grafana toolkit either.
No, so in both cases, this is actually part of our Go SDK. So if you're building a backend application or a backend plugin, so it might be a data source with a backend, it might be an application with a backend. If you're building that, then you use our SDK, which provides abstraction, so you don't have to understand the plugin protocol between the Grafana server and your plugin. Makes it much easier to quickly build things, like manage the life cycling of your plugin. In that SDK, we've now added support for distributed tracing with OpenTelemetry. So for users that are monitoring their Grafana instance, like you can now provide like a much more fine-grained, detailed view of how requests are actually executing. So previously, if you have this enabled, then basically Grafana would recognize that it's called out to your data source, and then time has elapsed, and then the request has come back. Whereas with this new support in the SDK, it means that a developer can add custom spans so that you can really break down like all the steps that are going on in that execution. So like your plugin's been called, you've called the database, you're waiting on the response from the database. Oh, that's the thing that was slow. It wasn't my plugin's execution. It was the fact that I was taking ages to get anything back from the database. So it really enables like operators of Grafana to understand where bottlenecks exist, and plugin developers to also get this information so that they can optimize and improve within their code. So yeah, I think it's a really nice feature.
So is this on the back end or also front end?
So this is all on the back end, this new support.
Okay, so mainly for data sources.
Yes. We
Okay.
do have an example of this. So I think in the data source HTTP backend, let's see, where would it be? I'm sure it's in here somewhere, but I can't remember where.
That's okay.
Yeah, in here there is tracing.
Okay.
So you can have a look at this particular one if you want to see how to implement tracing.
Okay, that's great. So let's say let me put this in here as well on in the comments in the chat. So this is what this is an example of how the tracing can be implemented within a data source plugin in particular.
Yep.
We have
And
a
we
quick
also have
question here.
documentation as well.
Okay. We have a question here from Ravi Teja Chandika. Is there any plugin to configure different email templates according to their customer's view?
Different email templates. I'm afraid I'm not quite sure I understand the question.
Yeah, maybe they're asking about like from an alerting
Yeah.
perspective, potentially, according to different customers. Yeah, I think we need more information on this. So maybe where should people go to give us more information if there's something that needs to be troubleshooted and there needs to be a bit more of a back and forth for using and for creating plugins? Where should people go?
So the two best places are our forum and Slack. So I can quickly dig out the URL for our forum. So where are we? Plugin development. That's the best place to go if you want to ask questions about creating plugins, as well as our community Slack, which I can quickly grab a link for as well.
I have a question about creating plugins for somebody who hasn't created a plugin yet. We got a few questions around this topic in the last one when we were talking about scenes. And I think people were a little concerned that, scenes is an extra complication because it's new and, people there haven't been a lot of people that have used it yet because it was just released. So if someone were going to get started with plugins, would you suggest that there are some that are like easier to get started with than others?
So I think we're at the moment we're reorganizing and desperately trying to improve our documentation to support users in this. It is an area that we've had a lot of feedback on as needing some fine tuning. So we are investing there. The plugin developer guides are a good place to get started, and they will give you a basic tutorial. Again, I don't feel like there's any easier path. It kind of depends on like your own skill set and what you're trying to do. Like if you're a front end developer, then you're probably going to find building a panel a lot easier than building a data source, but it's not, maybe not. And again, I think there's some really good resources out there. In particular, we recently saw a community contribution from Volkov Labs, and they've created some video tutorials on how to create a panel plugin from scratch, which I can probably link folks to as well. But these were great to see. Like they're a really good set of videos, and there's a post about them within the community if anyone wants to find a quick link to all three. But these take you through like creating a new plugin, setting up tests, and actually getting it all the way to publishable within the catalog. So yeah, it's great to see content like this come from the community as well. So it's not just us.
Okay, yeah, that's awesome. I feel like it's even better if it's from the community than if it's from us because people are excited enough about it.
Yep. No, we were really happy to see it. It was great.
Are there any things that you can share about the future plans for plugins? Where are plugins going?
So I think extensions and scenes are going to be big for plugins in the future. I think we'll see new extension points opening up. The documentation is something that we will be spending serious time to improve and make sure that we've got tools there for everyone to get started with. There's a lot that we're kind of doing at the moment, which is maybe more internal focused about like how you actually run plugins in Grafana, and that's not necessarily as visible to those building plugins. But another thing that I would really like to do is improve the metadata around plugins with the aim of making it easier for users to understand at a glance the state of a plugin, and hopefully for plugin developers to be able to build a more meaningful interaction with their audience. So an example of this is at the moment, our plugin JSON exposes like a links object. So if you choose to, you can provide a link to your GitHub repo, or you can provide a link to your documentation or website. If we got a bit more standardized around that, we could actually make it a lot easier for folks to discover like when was the last commit, or does this project accept GitHub sponsorship? So maybe like there's ways that we can start to support plugin developers from directly within the Grafana UI, so that if you're a user and you love a plugin, like you easily know how you can help that developer and show them that it's of value to you. They could link directly to feature requests or bug reports and provide a much more customized experience for their plugin. And I would love to open that up fairly soon.
And for let's say somebody has created a brand new Grafana plugin. It's all open source, so pretty much anyone can already use it as long as it's out there. But what does somebody need to do to have their plugin displayed in on our site so that people can more easily discover it?
So if you want to distribute your plugin through the catalog, then it has to go through a review process. And this also makes it available in Grafana Cloud as well. So we basically need to vet it to make sure that it's not going to introduce anything malicious and potentially put people at risk. So we do have some tools out there to help you validate your plugin, so you can understand, like, is it following best practices? Is it going against like restricted API usage that would get immediately rejected? And it's an easy way to kind of get that fast feedback before it then comes to the plugins team to review. We do link to it within our documentation, but I'll quickly find the direct link for this tool as well.
My secret plan for this is I want to create a plugin. So I'm already telling you that so that I can figure out where I need to go. So this is a plugin validator. So what sort of things does it validate?
So I could quickly share my screen again. Yonder. So not too long ago, I updated the README for this. And basically, we show you all the different analyzers that this runs. Here we go. So basic things, checks for broken links, forbidden access to things. It'll check things like, do you have a README so that people can actually discover what your plugin does? Do you have logos so that when you're viewing it within the catalog, does it have like a nice display image that makes it stand out? We check for, is it using Angular? If you try and submit a new plugin using Angular, it is going to get rejected. We must be very clear on that. Whether you've got the correct kind of like license types that we can accept as Grafana. A whole host of things. There's like 20, 30 odd analyzers that we run. And this is all stuff that used to be very manual for the plugin team, which is why submissions could take a significantly long time for us to review. But we've been really investing in automation to kind of help speed up that process. There's always more we could do. One thing, we might start to mandate a few more things to help us make it easier to test, but ultimately that's so that plugin developers don't have to wait weeks on end before their plugin is published. We're always looking at ways we can speed that up.
So what is the time frame that's involved? Let's say there are only minor issues in a plugin. Maybe they've already run this validator and it was all okay. How long would it take for it to officially be approved?
So there's no committed time frame that we can really give, because it's very subjective depending on like how many plugins we have in our queue and what the team's able to action and the very nature of those. Like, we do have a way of prioritizing, and as I mentioned, we have commercial partners who we have certain obligations to. Like if you pay a fee to publish your commercial plugin with us, then we have an obligation to kind of like make sure that yours are reviewed as soon as possible. We do try and prioritize updates to existing plugins as opposed to new plugins entirely, because the idea there is like it's already got a user base and we want to make sure that they can take advantage of the latest features, or like, as you say, maybe there's a security vulnerability that they want to get out there. So we're keen to get those through as soon as we can. So it really can vary. We've seen sometimes it can be within a week, sometimes it can be closer to a month. It really does vary.
And who's responsible for vetting these? There's a plugins team, you said, and that's part of their daily job description, basically, to kind of review these new plugins.
Kind of, yeah. It's a shared responsibility, and we're, again, with the automation that we're building, we're hoping to open this up to more and more people who would be able to help out with that review process. We're also looking at ways that we can improve the security of how plugins run to kind of make us less not paranoid, but able to be more confident in letting things be published. So, for instance, we're exploring a way to do front-end sandboxing at the moment. So front-end panel would only have access to the data it's meant to have. It can't access the global browser. And other things like running plugins remotely so that you can run them in your own data center and then connect out to us. All things that we hope will improve the process for getting things into the catalog.
How do people submit a plugin to be reviewed?
It's really easy. You basically just have to build a distribution of it, also do a release, and we have those workflows, as you saw through the Create Plugin tool, to do that for you. Then within Grafana Cloud, you can sign up for a free account. There's no need for anything paid. There's no credit card required or anything like that. I can quickly show you. Actually, it's probably the easiest way.
Sure.
If I share my screen, let's go for the go on my other profile. So what? There we go. Go to your account. And this is because I've already done it, isn't it? There we go. So you can just go to My Plugins, submit new plugin, give us the distribution zip, tell us where the source code is so we can scan it, answer a couple of questions, and then submit. That's all you have to do. And
awesome. That seems pretty straightforward.
You get feedback. So if you had a plugin submitted here, then you'd see the name of it, you'd see details, and that would bring you into like basically our ticketing queue, so you can see any responses that you've had from the Grafana team.
And do you have any concrete plans yet for with regards to the Scenes apps? Because I spoke when I was talking to Torkel, he said that eventually the plan will be to integrate, to basically make it so that all the core dashboards are going to be kind of Scenes apps. They're going to be running on Scenes. And how is that going to change the plugins? I mean, is the normal non-Scenes app going to eventually be deprecated?
I don't think it will really affect plugin developers to that point, because it's more just what are you using as your front-end library, and this is an option for you. Whether it replaces things in Grafana UI, I'm not particularly sure.
Okay.
But no, it's not something that I think is going to be of concern for plugin developers.
Question from Braden, XD12. Is there any chance for developers to enhance enterprise plugins?
That is an interesting question, because now all enterprise plugins have just been announced as you can use them for free in the free tier as well. As far as I understand, all enterprise plugins are still closed source, and I'm not aware of any plans for that to change.
What's an example of a really popular enterprise plugin that people can now use if they're on the free tier?
Let's have a look.
Sorry to put you on the spot.
No, not at all.
So these were plugins that were only available if you were paying for Grafana Cloud, basically?
Mm-hmm. So this was only in the paid tiers or in enterprise. So if I show my screen, then let's have a look. So if you go to grafana.com/Grafana grafana/plugins, then you get all the plugins that are available in the catalog. You can see those that are enterprise. So there's some really popular ones like Datadog, AppDynamics. Which other ones are pretty good? Wow, they're all good. Honeycomb's quite a fun one recently. Yeah.
So even the
Smoke.
ones that we create, the enterprise plugins that we create, they're still closed source?
That's my understanding.
Do you know if there are any plans to change that?
Not that I'm
Not
aware
that you
of.
have to admit to that right now,
it's
live.
interesting. So with me, I focus on plugins platform, which is kind of like the way in which plugins are created and how they can be installed within Grafana. We also have Jay in the product team who focuses on all the enterprise data sources and which new ones will come in. He might be able to give an answer later on as a follow-up, but I'm not aware of any plans to do that.
Okay. Well, we've just hit the hour. Is there anything else that you want to say as a parting message to people who are to developers of plugins or would be developers of Grafana plugins?
Don't be shy. Come talk to us. Tell us what in the experience is confusing, what sucks, what is painful. Like, we are always keen to hear from you. If it's of interest, we would love to know, like, whether you want us to do these more regularly. Do you want us to do a monthly office hours where you can bring your problems to us and we'll live debug them with you, or we'll give roadmap updates? Like, let us know how we can best help you, and we will be more than willing to serve. So come find us in Slack, come find us in the forum. We're always here.
Great. And this is the Grafana Slack as well. And here's the community forum. And that one specifically for the plugin development section as well. Thank you so much, David, for coming on and answering my questions and other people's questions on plugins. If anyone has any other questions, I will also be watching the YouTube comments, so you can feel free to ask there, or just go into the community forum and Slack, so that there will be other people that are monitoring that instead of just me.